scene.
The basic process of stop-motion animation is still practiced in much the same way as it was in the days of Willis O'Brien and Ray Harryhausen. At Chiodo Brothers Productions, Kim Blanchett is animating a mother and baby megatherium. The prehistoric sloth-like animals will be featured in a Japanese television commercial produced by Sente Services Corporation.
This pointer is actually my reference point on how much I've moved the puppet.
But while traditional stop-motion animation tools like the surface gauge are still used, today's animators have a distinct advantage over their predecessors. In recent years, they have used video cameras mounted alongside the film camera, which freeze and store the previously exposed frame for instant reference.
It allows us to have a much better reference to control those minute increments and to create a much smoother movement.
After 410 exposed frames, the animation sequence is complete and ready for review.
So what the director wants to do, the eating is fine, the walking out is fine, everything's fine. They just want to work on the entrance, the style of the walking. They think he walks a little too light-footed. His claws are so big that they want the feet to bend a little bit inward, so he's walking on the inside, the outside of his feet, and then drag the feet as much as you can to make them look heavy.
After making sure he has the right moves with his own body, Blanchett is ready to animate the entire sequence again. Frame by frame, he infuses the megatherium with the desired gait and personality. A leading contemporary stop-motion animator is Phil Tippett, who has been at the center of recent technological advances in the craft. In his Berkeley, California studio, Tippett designs heroes and villains for some of Hollywood's most popular films.
My main inspiration came in 1950, what was it, 3 or 4, I think, or 5, when King Kong came on television. And in 58, I saw Harryhausen's Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. I just fell in love with the surreality of the objects moving themselves. I had no idea what generated them, but it was just, you know, kind of a passionate fixation.
An original member of George Lucas's Industrial Light and Magic, Tippett, along with ILM colleague John Berg, was put in charge of the stop-motion animation department for The Empire Strikes Back. Their first challenge was to design and animate the giant Imperial walkers. The story called for the walkers to march across a snowy plain. The snow was simulated on the miniature set by baking soda.
That could be a big problem, particularly if you had a cold and were sneezing, because it had a tendency to, you know, blow your set away, or if you made the wrong kind of move, or if you forgot what you were doing and put your elbow down, your elbow would disturb the set. We had made like little trap doors that we could crawl into the set and open up the trap doors that had perfect feathered edges on them. We'd get up and animate the puppets and close the, you know, trap doors back down, and they'd take a frame of film and open up the trap doors and animate the puppets.
The imposing walkers were animated in extremely minute increments in order to give them a slow, lumbering gait. At the opposite end of the movement spectrum were the fleet-footed snow beasts called tauntauns.
And we shot a great deal of reference footage of horses, you know, looking at the characteristics. What I'll tend to do on any given character is begin to build up a book of notes that can be pretty extensive.
Because the tauntauns had to move quickly, the effects team wanted to replicate motion blur seen in live-action photography of fast-moving objects. For example, in looking at footage of a dog running, the dog will appear blurred in each individual frame. With traditional stop-motion animation, the moving object maintains clearly defined edges in each frame of film. The absence of motion blur results in the slight strobing effect characteristic of stop motion. For the tauntaun shots, the puppet was moved slightly along a motion control track with each opening of the camera shutter in order to create a blur. This first use of motion blur involved only forward momentum, but Tippett's next project, Dragonslayer, brought motion blur to all the creature's movements. While Tippett designed the dragon itself, engineer Stuart Ziff built a complex motion control system he called the Dragon Mover. Ziff's invention consisted of 6 motor-driven rods, 1 for each leg, 1 to move the body, and 1 to control the head and neck. Tippett's animation of the dragon was programmed into a computer which controlled the system. The process successfully added motion blur to all the creature's movements and gave rise to a new term, go motion. There was an additional benefit to having all the complex moves of an animation sequence stored in the computer.
Development of this go motion process, and that began on Empire, really allowed us to start thinking about refining the performance. You wouldn't really bother ever shooting a final shot until you had the entire performance worked out.
The result was the most horrifyingly believable dragon ever to strafe the screen. In the midst of fast-moving technological advances, Tippett continues to work with the eyes and hands of a stop-motion animator. As dinosaur supervisor on Jurassic Park, he transmitted his stop-motion skills into the computer, providing the animation for many key scenes, which were then rendered as computer-generated imagery.
Ultimately, no matter what tool you're using, whether it's stop motion, go motion, computer graphics, you're learning how to work with the limitations of the tools that you have. You have a mental image in your mind of what the thing should be moving like, and you're constantly moving. No, it shouldn't be like that. It should be like this. And just trying to, keep all this stuff moving towards what you see in your mind's eye.
As they continue to create movie magic one step at a time, Phil Tippett and a handful of other effects artists are carrying on the legacy of the pioneers of stop-motion animation.
Willis O'Brien started it, and I tried to follow with the concept that we're using stop-motion photography for our leading characters. Now, when you think of King Kong, a mass of metal with rabbit fur and sponge rubber on it, not a real person. His name is up there in lights with Greta Garbo, Clark Gable. He's part of Hollywood legend.
Ladies and gentlemen, look at Kong, the 8th wonder of the world.
In the hands of the masters of stop-motion animation, movie magic is truly created one step at a time.